top 200 website. 53% of the developers we survey visit every month. 100,000 people are visiting, roughly speaking, our website and technical websites. And then when it comes to the company's financials, just like taking a step back, we were acquired by one of the world's largest technology investors in summer of 2021. And here, I should also sort of say, I've been here for 5 years. So sometimes like when you've been in a relationship for a long time or lived in a place for a long time. So we were acquired by Prosus in summer of 2021 for $1.8 billion. And prior to, we raised about $153 million in capital. Our final round was a Series E. That was an $85 million round.
Hey guys, quick interruption. I don't do this often, but this is episode 50 on Marketing on Mars. I just want to say thank you to all the viewers for tuning in regularly to see me and my guests talk marketing over shots of hot sauce. It's been a crazy fun journey so far, talking to guests from companies like Microsoft, Allo Yoga, Aura, Stack Overflow, Acquire.com, and more. Thank you so much for your continuous support. And now back to the episode.
In this episode, I'm talking to Khalid El Khatib, CMO of Stack Overflow, the largest questions and answers site for developers. Over 53% of developers visit Stack Overflow every single day. That's well over 100 million visitors per month. We're going to talk about the details of Stack Overflow's acquisition in 2021 for $1.8 billion, how much the company spends on marketing and across which channels, and lastly, the number one marketing channel for Stack Overflow that's driving a 15x return on investment. What is this secret channel and why does it work so well? We'll also try to figure out things like cost per acquisition, lifetime value of the customer, and more. And if you can't answer a question, we both have to take a shot of hot sauce. Wish me luck, Martians. Hope you enjoy this one. Hello, Martians. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing on Mars. Today, we have a super special guest. We have the CMO of Stack Overflow, Khalid El Khatib. Stack Overflow, basically, they're like a Reddit for programmers. It's where you can ask questions and answer questions. It's probably the world's largest development community. Something crazy like 53% of all developers visit Stack Overflow every single day. So super excited to have Khalid on today. Khalid, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about everything. But before we start, let's do a quick little intro. Your background is, from what I see, your background is largely in communications. Wherever you've gone, you started off working at a company called Teach for America, largely comms, and then you moved over to an agency, and then you moved over to GLG before moving to Stack Overflow. But largely, your background is in marketing and comms.
Yeah, I think one of the key differentiators for me throughout my career, in addition to the companies you just mentioned, is I've also done a lot of writing. I've written for a number of magazines, Paper, Vice, op-eds, and a number of business publications. And so I've always sort of thought of myself as a strong communicator. And even though my team today is really a demand gen marketing team, I think that being a strong writer and strong communicator has been a real differentiator when it comes to things like campaign copy, but also when it comes to helping the CEO craft speeches and emails and internal comms being a bigger focus today than it was a few years ago for marketing functions. And so, I've really, I think for me, a career in communications and a background in brand marketing has really helped me throughout my career.
Yeah. Especially now when I talk to a lot of different CMOs and leaders in marketing, it seems like we went through a phase where performance marketing was huge. It's all about knowing all the different tools, where are you placing your ads, and that technical aspect was super important. And it is still important today, but a lot of that budget that used to be spent in performance marketing have been shifting over to more events and community, right? Stack Overflow is one of the largest communities for developers. So being a good having a good community and running good events, all of that is communication, right? And so you got that down.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. I think we talk about community being a competitive moat at Stack Overflow and a real differentiator for us. I think a couple of things. So one, throughout my career, I've really been focused on community. At Teach for America, we had a community of what we called core members who were teaching in regions all over the country and world. While I was at WPP, that agency you mentioned, I worked a lot with TED, which has a very rich community, not just through the millions or billions of people who watch their videos, but the people who attend the conferences. And then at GLG, where we were doing one-to-one consultations, there was a big community of experts who were part of that. So community marketing is something I've always been passionate about for sure, which is a lot of communication. I think the other thing that, is really important relative to what you just mentioned is we're all talking about and thinking about generative AI right now. How is AI going to change not just the role of the marketer, but of all of our lives? And where AI continues to struggle, and likely will, no matter how sophisticated the data models get, is in human and emotional communication. And that's what, marketers have to push themselves to continue to bring to the table. You mentioned that people were, all in on performance marketing for a period of time and still are, but a lot of that can be automated. It can be outsourced to agencies. It can be, there are a number of now sophisticated tools that do that A/B test the heck out of every single campaign and slogan. But, I think it's really incumbent on marketers to say, okay, what is like our North Star? Thematically, what are we going after? What's resonating with people? And how can we make this communication more human? And that's why I think, AI is going to change a lot of things, but it's not going to put marketers out of a job.
No, definitely not. And I'm sure we're going to dive into everything Stack Overflow related, talk about all the different channels and everything. But before we do that, there's a little bit of a tradition on the show. We start the show off with a shot of hot sauce. And I got a new hot sauce. I'm going to introduce this in a bit. It's like 2 times more spicy than this one from what I heard. So I've just bought this. But what weapon do you have today for the show?
I just bought the classic.
The classic Cholula's.
You know how I landed there. I was at the well, first off, I don't like spicy, so this is like quite a challenge for me. But I was looking at all of the backs of the labels, and I was going based. They're all 0 calories, but some of them have incredibly high sodium content, and so I went with the one with low sodium content. Yeah.
Oh my god! I didn't even notice. Holy crap! This has 110 milligrams of sodium. I didn't even realize that.
That's low. So is this one. But there were a couple I picked up that were like 250 milligrams of sodium. That's like 15% of your daily intake. So
I didn't even realize. Okay, I'm going to have to let people know in on this little secret in the future. But first, you're the first to experience this. Oh, wow, this cap is still on. That's how new this is. So we're going to start off with a shot of hot sauce.
Okay.
And I'm going to be asking you questions throughout the show, trying to figure out all the secrets of Stack Overflow and everything. And anytime that we can't answer a question, we'll both take another shot of hot sauce. That is theme for today. Hopefully this works. Okay, I'm going to pour this out. Oh, wow, this is super thick. Wow.
All right.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers. I did water right away.
Wow. This is actually really, really spicy. Holy smokes.
Okay, so I know to avoid it.
Please avoid. Oh my God. My face is red. Holy smokes. All right. This is a good time to ask the question, to pass the mic over to you.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to need to recover. Wow, that is... Now I know. Don't take a lot of that. Note to self. All right. Before we start and diving into everything regarding Stack Overflow, let's talk a little bit about what you guys do. I mean, I gave a very short, high-level intro, but maybe you can explain really briefly what exactly Stack Overflow does.
Sure, yeah. So Stack Overflow started in 2008, so 15-year anniversary in September. StackOverflow.com, like you said, is the world's largest community for developers and technologists. So when people get stuck when they're writing a piece of code or technology, they'll either Google it or they'll go directly to Stack Overflow. And so you often hear from developers, or if you walk by a developer, you'll see a tab open to stackoverflow.com. And so our public platform, which is what we call our website and universe of websites, is roughly speaking one of the top 200 most popular websites in the world, about as much traffic as Hulu, which often shocks people, because if you don't write code, you might not hear about it. And then we monetize in basically three ways. So we have an advertising product, or a suite of products that we call reach and relevance, standard banner ads, more technical ads, and then an employer branding product where companies will sort of position themselves as good places to work for developers. Because as you can imagine, a traditional branding campaign to get someone to work at a company doesn't land as much with developers who want to know how competitive pay is, whether or not you're remote, what the tech stack looks like, for example. And so there are lots of nuances there that we work with companies on. And then where we make most of our money, and the product that we invest the most in, pretty intuitively, is a private version of Stack Overflow. So we call it Stack Overflow for Teams. And that is an instance of Stack Overflow replicates the gamification, the reputation, the upvotes, that allows people working at companies, technologists, developers, product marketers, product managers, to troubleshoot and discuss proprietary technology. So the product actually came about because Microsoft came to us many, many years ago, or not that many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, and said, hey, can we have a private version of this, or can we license stackoverflow.com? Our developers are asking questions in their website that they shouldn't be. And the folks who were here at the time said, hey, that's a good idea. And since then, we brought on 10,000 organizations who are now using the tool. So lots of the biggest banks in the world, in addition to the biggest technology companies, because everyone, as we can talk about, is going through something of a digital transformation, whether that's cloud migration, a shift to remote work, leaning into AI, ML. But developers have to work more quickly than ever. And then there are all these business continuity challenges, reorgs, shift to remote, shift back to in-person, what have you.
Yeah, for sure. So what's some of the bigger, would Microsoft be one of your bigger clients, or are there other larger companies?
Microsoft are one of our largest clients across the board. So in addition to being a user of Stack Overflow for Teams and having tens of thousands of users within Teams, they also are a big advertising client. So they have a lot of inventory on the site. As you can imagine, all of the cloud companies and cloud providers are Amazon, Google, and Microsoft in particular. And Microsoft is a big partner of ours. So we do co-selling with Microsoft as well.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into the numbers a little bit. Obviously, you guys are the largest community for developers. How large are we talking about? Give us some numbers. Any numbers in terms of revenue that you can share, or company valuation?
Yeah, so sure. So first off, on the public platform side, like we said, top 200 website, 53% of the developers we survey visit every month. 100,000 people are visiting, roughly speaking, our website and technical websites. And then when it comes to the company's financials, just like taking a step back. So we were acquired by one of the world's largest technology investors, a company called Prosus, which is based in Amsterdam, in summer of 2021. I've been here. I should also sort of say I've been here for 5 years. So sometimes, it's like when you've been in a relationship for a long time, or lived in a place for a long time, like other time blurs together. So if I stumble on dates, that's why. So we were acquired by Prosus in summer of 2021 for $1.8 billion. And prior to that, we raised about $153 million in capital. Our final round was a Series E, which I was here for, in June of 2020. And that was to the tune of, that was an $85 million round.
Wow. So acquired for $1.8 billion. That's incredible. What about in terms of revenue? Because so you talked about the ad side as being a revenue stream, and then the employer branding, and then the private version, Stack Overflow for Business, those being the three main revenue channels. What does that add up to? Revenue per year, or anything that you can share?
Sure. Yeah. So the interesting thing is we're on an April 1st fiscal year, or our fiscal year starts on April 1st. So it's March 30th today. So I can't tell you what our revenue is going to be for this year because we're still like every company, the final quarter push, end of year push. We're hoping for a big couple of days. So what I can share is in the first half of the year, our team's line of business surpassed revenue from reach and relevance for the first time in the company's history. And that was to the tune of about 50 million in ARR. And so, we're hoping for a sort of 6-figure revenue number by the end of the fiscal year, and continue to grow year over year.
Sorry, 50 million in ARR
from Stack Overflow from teams.
Okay.
From the first half of the year. That's something we announced at our.
So assuming everything goes as planned, that's going to be like $100 million sales figure by the end of the year.
Not quite, because that's not really how ARR works. Not by the end of the year, it wouldn't necessarily double, but in the future, we're hoping that Teams becomes $100 million ARR number for sure.
Wow, amazing. Okay, cool. So that's incredible. Talk to us about growth. As the largest development community, most of the developers already know about Stack Overflow, and a lot of companies probably already know about Stack Overflow. What are the growth opportunities there? Are there still companies out there that are on the fence about the premium version? Is that where all the nuggets of growth is, or are there other revenue channels that you guys are looking into?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways to answer that question. So I think in a couple of ways. So one, every developer knows about stackoverflow.com. Not every developer knows that we have this private instance or this product called Teams. And if they do know, if they do know about it, they don't necessarily know the value proposition. They don't know how to sell it into their organization, because I see developers often not a budget holder. The other thing that's relevant to that point is like business decision makers or budget owners often don't know about Stack Overflow. Because if you think about it, we've only been around since 2008. The majority of VPs of engineering, CIOs, CTOs haven't written a line of code in sometimes 20 years or ever. And so there's like still a lot of education that needs to happen among the C-suite or leaders of engineering organizations. And that's been compounded in this macroeconomic environment when budget owners or the people who are signing contracts are now CFOs and COOs. So I actually spend a lot of time talking to other technical marketers about for the past 2 years or the past, however many years, we've really been focused on reaching CIOs, CTOs, VPs of engineering, like everyone else who has a technical SaaS product. And now suddenly, over the last 6 to 9 months, people are saying, okay, how do we reach CFOs? How do we reach COOs? And so we're investing a lot more in value-based selling. For one thing that we did, for example, is we commissioned a total economic impact report from Forrester, because, we're getting a lot more in this economic environment questions on ROI, what their investment gets them. And so, I think we still have some work to do on the awareness front, despite being such a recognized brand. And then the other thing is that the world is moving really, really quickly. And so, one of our key value propositions 18 months ago was like attracting, hiring, and onboarding talent, because everyone was hiring like crazy, And so we said, in a remote context, when your mandate is to hire 10,000 engineers, Stack Overflow for Teams can get them up to speed quickly. That doesn't matter as much today, especially in the tech industry where people are focused much more on efficiency. And so that message, for example, is really pivoted to be more about continuity. So if you have to do a RIF or a division is being eliminated, how do you ensure that all of that knowledge is being captured? Or if there are people moving around and M&A activity happening, how do you ensure that it is as continuous as possible? So, that's the other. And then there are things like AI, ML. A number of companies are focused on things like cloud migration. And finally, and this is a very long answer to your question, I think there are still lots of industries that have yet to embrace like a number of best practices when it comes to ensuring that their technology organizations are sound. So tech companies, yes, like the majority of them are Stack Overflow customers. banks and financial service firms, increasingly so, but manufacturing, pharma, some auto companies, they still have a lot of work to do, and they have pretty lofty goals that they're trying to achieve, whether that's around climate or, adopting AI initiatives or the cloud, for example. And we're well positioned to help them get there.
Okay. So obviously very lofty goals for you guys. You guys want to break 100 million in ARR, big goals. And still a lot of companies don't know the value prop. So what are you guys doing in terms of marketing? Let's dive into marketing a little bit. You own the marketing budget. Talk to us about, first of all, very high level, how much are you guys spending per month or per year in marketing?
It's, not to be a cop-out because I don't want to take another shot of hot sauce, but we're still figuring out our budget for next year. I think we're no longer in a world, we don't live in a world in which you can say, here's my budget for next year, and then I'm going to manage accordingly for the next 12 months. You have to reforecast like on a monthly or quarterly basis. The world keeps changing more quickly than anyone can keep up. And so we truly, like many SaaS companies, try to earmark roughly 10% of our revenue target for marketing. And so, I think our budget will be upwards of 10 million for next year and less than 16 million, somewhere within that sweet spot. And then the marketing programs budget represents roughly 80% of that, because we are indeed a demand gen focused budget. And we have the benefit of having a strong brand so that we don't have to make a massive investment in brand marketing.
Okay. Sorry. So total marketing budget is between 10 to 16 million. I don't see any lights in the back, so I think we're clear on that answer. No, we don't have to take a shot of hot sauce, but give us a breakdown. Give us a breakdown of where that 10 million goes. You mentioned, demand gen, a lot of demand gen. Which channels specifically? Where are you spending that 10 million?
Yeah. So the majority of that spend is allocated towards performance marketing or programs. So our most effective channels are SEO, organic, and search, SEO, SEM, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn, when it comes to reaching business decision makers in particular, so engineering managers, and because the majority of IC developers are not on LinkedIn, or their experience on LinkedIn is not great. They're getting a lot of pings for jobs they don't want. They're constant pitches. So we do pretty well when it comes to search, and a lot of our funds are allocated over to our performance marketing agency, which we're in the process of changing over to a new one right now. The other sort of this, I would say the second biggest line item for us is field. So 2022 was sort of a rebuild for us after, a very anemic 2020, and then a sort of wishy-washy 2021, where events were, swung like a pendulum. They were either wildly successful or they were poorly attended and a huge waste of money. And in 2021, in 2022, we seem to have found our footing. So we know what works there. We saw like pretty excellent ROI, about 15x ROI when it came to spend to qualified pipeline and field. And so this year we're doubling our field budget and really committing to continuing to make a splash there. And so what that looks like for us is pay per meeting events. We've seen actually good success. It depends on the vendor, it depends on the audience, it depends on the city. But we've seen good success when we get those things right when it comes to pay per meeting events. So sort of like matchmaking, this company will talk to you, we'll talk to this company. Here's the challenges they have, here's how we can solve them. When it comes to experiential, so we're doing like a car racing type of event in Atlanta today that's well attended, fully booked. The virtual wine tastings, coffee tastings, because technologists love their coffee, that other companies have seen success with, and then happy hours and the like. So the thing that I will say about happy hours is those are the sort of the nut that we have yet to fully crack. It depends on the day of the week. It depends on the city. There are lots of sort of factors where it can be very hit or miss. So what we're trying to do to ensure that we don't waste money or people's time is we're trying to work with companies like Microsoft and Slack, for example, to say, hey, let's do this one together. let's share our lists, let's share the costs, and let's make sure that we pack the room with people that we both care about.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned happy hour events. I'd love to dive into all of the other paper meeting events, experiential. And regarding happy hours, that's one of the things that I'm trying to play around with because on the podcast, I've interviewed well over 60 CMOs / CEOs and founders. And I've always thought, what if we got these people in a room? Like these are some of the smartest people. And so we're testing out right now in Vancouver. We've ran 3 happy hour, very casual happy hours, as you can imagine, with a show where we take shots of hot sauce, it has to be casual. We've ran 2, and we've got about 20 founders come out for both the events. And I'm running another one today, and I think we're getting 30 founders coming out. And that's only in Vancouver. But you're in New York, right?
Yep.
New York. We've had a handful of people come on the show from New York. So, hey, whenever I do one in the future, I'll ping you. I'll let you know when we do a happy hour one. But I think the key there has to be super casual. What do you think? What is your thoughts on a good happy hour session?
Sort of, in my opinion, it's like very binary. So like, I think there are all these things that people don't consider. Like I was invited to a VC happy hour yesterday, and it's a VC I love. I love some of the founders that they work with, but it's like the end of the fiscal year for me and the end of the quarter for so many. And so it's like, look, I had to work till 10. I couldn't make it. And I'm sure they didn't consider that when they booked it, or maybe that was the only day that worked. So my take on the sort of casual factor is I think you're right. It either has to be super casual, like a place that's very chill, you can drop in and out of, easy to get to,
or like
nice,
crazy,
or very fancy. Yeah. Like, so if people RSVP, they would feel too bad canceling. And we've seen, we're not spending $500 a head on these things, but we're doing like dinners in cities like New York and San Francisco that are incredibly well attended by very senior people. And the strategy there is to get senior people from prospect companies and from customer companies, along with one of our executives. So our CEO, fortunately, is very extroverted, loves meeting customers and prospects, and he's sold out private rooms at restaurants and sold out private rooms and restaurants in New York, San Francisco, and other cities. So I think you either have to guilt people into going for sure, by making it really fancy, or to your point, invite as many people as possible, qualified people as possible in a very casual setting.
And when you're running these kind of events, happy hour events with such senior level people, are they most, how do you usually run them? Like, do you run them, give me the details. So how far in advance do you run them? Charge for tickets at the door, or pre-charge for tickets and all that? Like, and people are probably flying in from different cities as well. So are the flights covered? Like, give us the details of how you run them.
Totally depends on the event. I would say, broadly speaking, we never charge for anything, but we try to be pretty discerning in how we promote things, because we are a very high profile brand. So if we were to say, Stack Overflow is hosting a happy hour in San Francisco, anyone can come, we would probably have a lot of people come who just wanted a Stack Overflow t-shirt or a sticker.
Exactly.
So, we really lean on marketing or email marketing, and then a lot of sales and SDR outreach to get the right people in the room. We do it at least 4 weeks in advance to give people a heads up, and then have a reminder cadence. And again, the thing that's like most critical to me when our team is organizing these things, and especially to a very expensive event, like the car racing event in Atlanta today was not cheap. And so what's most critical to me is that instead of giving folks the sales pitch from a salesperson, which, we've done, and it's been successful, to really try to get a customer there who can speak on your behalf. So we had one of our big financial service firms customer, CTO from a big FinServ company today, who before everyone racing said, hey, this is what Stack Overflow for Teams has done at my company. It's been great. And I'm happy to not only talk to you about my experience, but share pain points with you as a peer. And so where we found incredible success at these dinners, at these happy hours, is like doing a lot of matchmaking between companies that have maybe not interacted together, like disparate industries, retail, big tech, FinServ, manufacturing, et cetera. But they all have very similar pain points because they run similar organizations.
So it's kind of like networking, because there's different CEOs and execs, or very high level people from different companies. They can network, they can potentially talk business, but at the same time, they're all coming together from Stack with together via Stack Overflow. So it's like a win-win for everybody kind of thing.
For sure. And I think the other thing that's been really interesting I think this was true I think in the pandemic, everyone was getting really creative about experiential or field because we couldn't get together in person. Like, I'm sure you too. I did like a chef lesson where, a
virtual,
or a chocolatier or a wine tasting with a sommelier. And then there was a little bit of fatigue around it. I was like, okay, I'm done with this. And now I think we're finally at a place where we can like have a little bit of fun with things. So for example, we rented out a movie theater for the opening week of Avatar 2 in the Bay Area.
Wow.
And we invited a bunch of customers to that. And we opened with a little commercial about our product that was like fun and tongue in cheek. And the salesperson who covered the region was front and center. And the cool thing about that event, which was like, light touch pitch, fairly inexpensive to rent out a movie theater screen, is that all of our prospects brought their kids. And so it was it was well attended, and they committed to going because they probably said to their kids, hey, like, want to see Avatar 2 on Tuesday night? And that was like, it was an idea that a salesperson had that turned out to be really great. And so I think there are lots of opportunities to continue to invest in field, to scale field. And then the final thing I'll say about field and why I'm so excited about it is one of the areas that we struggle with, and I think everyone struggles with, is organic and digital demand has an outsized impact on metro regions. So, we get more leads from New York and from the Bay Area than we do from Central. And so we can use field as a very surgical tool to augment our demand gen efforts in places like Tulsa or Austin or Houston or Toronto, for example. So that is, that's one reason too why we're unlocking more and more field budget this year.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about events. You mentioned events as your the first thing under field marketing. Obviously, they're really big, fancy events. It will cost you $70,000 for a booth and all that. I've heard mixed reactions as to how beneficial that is from an ROI standpoint, especially post-COVID. It seems like a lot of real conversations were happening virtually anyways, so that the in-person stuff doesn't matter as much as before. Do you still think these big events, these big kind of, glamorous, huge events, do they still work from an ROI perspective? What do you think?
I think it depends on the event, which is, not a cop-out. I genuinely believe that, having been to like probably 10 conferences last year. But what I will say, and it's maybe a little bit controversial, I have a lot of good friends who work in the conference space and who run really good conferences, is there is not much value in a booth anymore, unless it's a hyper-targeted conference. Like We Are Developers, which is a conference just for developers. We'll have a presence there, and I think it's important. But like a web summit or a collision where I spoke last year and will speak again this year, and is a really extraordinary conference, the majority of the people sort of milling about the expo halls, in my experience, are salespeople, SDRs, yes. And then in this environment, people who are looking for funding, people from seed companies who are networking, maybe looking for their next job. And so our strategy, but that said, I do think there are very high value people who still go to conferences. I do, my CEO does, my CTO does. I think they're often speaking now. And so our strategy, which has worked for us, is we continue to invest in thought leadership. So like I said, I spoke at Web Summit last year, my CEO spoke. We both went to Lisbon and Dublin for Dublin Tech and NextWeb in Amsterdam, all within the course of like a very short time period. So we hit all those conferences up. Because we were speakers, we had access to speaker networking opportunities. We networked with customer companies and prospective companies. And then with our guest passes, we brought salespeople. And so we actually, we didn't have a booth presence. We had people wearing t-shirts that said, I work at Stack Overflow, ask me how to bring Stack Overflow into your company. So the booth was sort of on the move. And then our sales folks were like in this very symbiotic way, going up to, SDRs who are working their booths and say, hey, I'll introduce you to my CMO if you introduce me to yours. I'll introduce you to my CEO if you introduce me to yours. And that was pretty effective to us. We generated quite a bit of pipeline and a fairly small spend because we really only had to cover T&E and a little bit of swag.
Exactly. And that might be 5K, 10K versus a booth could be 20, 30, 40, 50K.
100.
I was talking to several. I was talking to the CMO of Agora Pulse. They're like a competitor to Hootsuite and Sprout Social and all that. They used to spend 50, 70K per event, and they'll go to 10 or 15 events. So that's a huge event budget. Now they're doing exactly what they're doing. They just fly their team in, they're on the ground, and they're filming content. They're interviewing their ICP. They're interviewing the CMOs that are at the booth. They're interviewing the CEOs and people that are at the booths, and they're a moving booth, like you said. And so that is a lot more effective, like from a money standpoint, right?
100%. I think, and I think everyone's ICP is different also. Like, I think marketers are more likely to go to a conference than a technologist, for example. But I do think, at least for the next year or two, like when we're in this sort of, recessionary environment and T&E budgets are contracting, it's going to be pretty tough for a marketer to justify a robust conference strategy. Like 12 conferences in a year now, to me, it's like, that is irresponsible. That,
it's like, a lot.
Did you spend $150,000 or $250,000 at AWS reInvent? Maybe. Everyone goes to reInvent. Like, that's the conference. And I think every company, every marketer will probably have like their North Star conference. But the days of going to a conference every month or having this massive field team or events team, are likely over.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially for you guys, your target audience is COOs and CFOs. How many of them are going to be on the floor at events? And how many events?
They're all in the speaker lounge, right? I think
exactly.
And like, we're not pulling back on our speaker strategy in any way, and we're going to keep going to conferences, but we're not going to be at that booth. And the other thing is, and it ties back to what we were saying earlier, is when we're at an event, we try to do a dinner that's like shadow programming or whatever you want to call it. If there are a bunch of people in town and some of them are our customers, then we'll do a fancy dinner to the side, and that $8,000 is 20% of what we would have spent on a booth, but much more productive.
Yeah, I think that's what TED did so well. Experiential marketing. They always had a lot of speakers, and they always had events around speakers. I think that's what they did really well. You ever go out to the unconference styles where it's just very more casual, not formal, and they're like hiking and doing things outdoors? Like you talked about experiential. You ever do things like that? Your team?
Not really. No. I mean, the closest that we get is like, again, like more field events, the movie, the car racing.
Movie theater. Yeah.
Yeah. It's things that I've done at past companies. Like from from a customer experience perspective. But not really at Stack. I think the other thing is, in a post-pandemic world, people are more precious about their time and their travel schedule and everything else. Like, we used to just accept the fact that we would have to go to a conference, every single month, or travel to meet with the board every single quarter or what have you. And now it's like, why? We could do this. We could do this over Zoom, and it's probably more productive and more efficient, and it's certainly cheaper. And so I think if you're going to do something like that, it just has to be done extraordinarily well. And then like TED, and I represented TED for 3 years when I was at WPP. So I've been to Vancouver a number of times. I think not only did they do like the most amazing experiences, like putting people in autonomous cars before that was like a thing that was accessible to the public, or flying in a helicopter with a world famous explorer or what have you, they also curated the attendee list really well. So if you went to a dinner in a cave, not only would it be a really cool experience, but you would be sitting next to a famous painter or a renowned scientist or a really interesting author. And that's the other piece of it that I think that's so important. Like there have been a couple of times where I've been invited to a dinner and I've showed up and no one there is who I would consider to be a peer. And I felt like really out of place. Like where everyone is like a seed or a Series A company, and they're all, they want Stack Overflow to acquire them, or they're all talking about funding challenges the whole time. And that's not what keeps me up at night. And so I think curation is really important, and people need to continue to think about that also.
What was the worst event, and this is a hot hot sauce question. What was the worst event that you've been to in the last 12 months? That you're like, oh, why am I here?
Okay, I'll take a shot of hot sauce because I'm not going to say what the company was, but I'll tell you what made it bad. Does that work?
Okay. All right. That works.
I think I think something that I've learned about doing developer marketing is you just have to be like as candid and transparent as possible. If you say exactly what your product does and like don't bullshit a developer, they can see right through it, and don't be hyper.
Developers are also the hardest to sell to.
Absolutely,
out of everyone, I think. Yeah,
for sure. But they're right about a lot of things. You know, like I get it. I'm empathetic. You know, it may have been frustrating when I first started, and now I'm very empathetic to the developer perspective. But I went to a conference that, you know, said 2,000 attendees, like these incredible speakers in this great venue in New York, and I agreed to speak there because I live in New York. It's very easy. I showed up and like it was there were probably 300 people there as opposed to 2,000. It was in a hotel room in Midtown with 0 rooms. There were 20 people who attended my talk. The slides were barely ready. You could barely see the screen. And so, and it's not a small, it's a brand that people would recognize. And so I think I just think like you can misrepresent things like this, because if someone had said to me, look, we're expecting 300 people and, you know, there might only be 50 people watching your talk, but we'll post it, you'll have it, you can do whatever you want with it. I might have said, okay, 2 hours of my time, I'll make it work. But, you know, to walk into something when I was expecting something wildly different, I'll never do anything. Yeah. So that to me, the kicker.
Wow. That's okay. You can't name the event. When was this? Maybe we can do some. Maybe the Martians can do some.
It was last year.
Research.
I don't know what year. I don't know what month it was, but it was last year.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little easier on myself on this one. All right. Cheers. Oh, this is way too spicy.
I don't know how you're doing that. I can barely do this.
This is really bad. So you're not a spicy eater? Like zero?
No. I mean, like I grew up in Iowa, and my dad is Palestinian. And so it's like this combination. My mom is like, my mom's American, very butter heavy, cheese heavy, classic Midwest, no heat, no spice. And then Arabs are not famous for their spice either. So it's just culture.
Not at all. Yeah. Oh, that's spicy. Okay. Wow. So you mentioned performance marketing being one of your major channels. Did you say 50% of your marketing spend was for performance?
The marketing program spend is closer to 80% of our budget.
80%. Okay.
Yeah.
And only 20% is field marketing.
Yeah. I mean, yes, like that's how we're operating going into the year. But, you know, we have to like take a step back every single month or every single quarter. And if field continues to play like it did last year, then maybe we allocate away from performance and over to field.
Do you have a separate bucket just for branding where you're not expecting any return? It is just to get Stack Overflow out there? Or is your brand, the Stack Overflow, so strong in branding and everyone knows it that you don't even spend anything on branding?
We do have a very small, so it used to be, I used to try and get 10% of my marketing budget for branding. I think is, you know, ideally you want 10 to 20. I think most companies, I've underspent in it every single year. And so this year it's closer to 5% because
oh, wow.
You know, I like everyone, I want to make sure that I'm being very responsible with my funds. And it's difficult to justify ROI around brand spend. And so, I have some money earmarked, but not a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to the performance marketing piece, you must know, what is your CPA? I ask this because CFOs and COOs are difficult to reach. And so you have a certain funnel, but I could assume it's quite expensive. Do you know what your CPA is? And hopefully you can answer because my mouth is burning.
Well, looking at AdWords, so just looking at, the challenges we have, these three different lines of business. And so our blended CPA for like Teams, which is a SaaS product, is much higher than for advertising or employer branding, but the ASP is higher. And so like the ASP for one of our enterprise Teams customers, which is the highest tier of Stack Overflow for Teams, is almost 300,000. So quite a bit. So AdWords, one of the channels we invest in the most, our cost per MQL is about $2,400.
Okay, $2,400 cost per MQL. Okay, and what do you consider an MQL? Just someone that books a call, or do you have a different definition for you guys?
Yeah. Someone who is qualified to effectively book that call, right? And so someone who works at a company within our segments, within the appropriate team as well. So, it's not an engineering student at a university or someone from an 8-person company, for example.
Yeah. Do you guys use any kind of lead scoring mechanism where you rate whatever the book calls coming in, you give them a score out of 100 or whatever?
We do. And I'm an inch deep and a mile wide. And so there's a whole team that's focused on that. So there's not in addition to lead scoring, we're continuing to refine our SLAs, to get our response time down, to ensure that people are booking calls and meetings as quickly as possible. I think that's something, candidly, we've really invested a lot in the past couple of months in particular. Because it used to be, again, 9 months ago, we didn't realize how lucky we were. We being everyone in the world. There was a high volume of people who were looking to do things, and now the volume is not as high. And you often, if someone says, "Hey, I have budget," you have to spend it. You have to justify the value of your product very quickly, and you have to ensure that budget comes in as quickly as possible, because everyone is going through a reorg or sort of rethinking their vendor spend on it seems like a weekly basis these days.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like things are changing so quickly. Like we post a lot of our stuff on a variety of different social channels, YouTube, TikTok, and the algorithm for LinkedIn has been changing rapidly, very rapidly. YouTube recently had an algorithm update like 6 to 7 months ago. So if you notice, I don't know if you are a huge YouTuber or like watch YouTube videos, but a lot of the channels that used to be really big are now seeing 1/10 of their viewership because of the algorithm updates, and it's like across the board. It's pretty wild.
Totally.
Are you seeing anything like that?
We're less sort of focused on social platforms, but I think a couple of things. I mean, one, I think B2C marketers feel it the most. It's like Facebook was catastrophic for many people many years ago when they changed their algorithm. Reddit last year launched a Discover page, which has changed how people sort of leverage it. And Twitter obviously has gone through like enormous changes.
Huge.
The sort of ROI on Twitter is like totally different today than it was 6 months ago.
It's crazy.
And so we continue to invest primarily from a B2B perspective in LinkedIn. We have a presence on other platforms, but LinkedIn is where we drive the most demand. And because we spend quite a bit of money with them, they're pretty good about telling us, like, here's what you should be doing. Here are new products and new ways of thinking about launching a campaign. So we continue to see a lot of efficacy on LinkedIn. I think the biggest challenge with LinkedIn is it's really expensive.
Yeah, it is. So between LinkedIn, Google, and what was the other one? You guys are also on
in terms
mostly
of
LinkedIn and Google, right? In terms of performance?
Sure. We spend like a little bit of money on Bing. We do Reddit ads. We also have a big ABM motion, so we use 6 Sense for ABM. But in terms of like the efficacy of our channels, organic is by far and away the best performing. And we invest a lot in content. And we also do a lot of optimization working with our agency, followed by paid, Google and LinkedIn. And then field is a relatively new channel for us. So in terms of like the amount of pipeline it brings in, it's third after organic and paid, but it's more efficient than us. It's more efficient for us than paid. It's just challenging to scale.
So in terms of ROI, you would put organic as the number one channel?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. All right. Moving over, just want to talk a little bit about your personal life. I mean, you kind of obviously a CMO at a very, very big company. I know that you also support the other organizations like the CMO huddles. Your career has grown really rapidly, very fast. Like, talk to us about, I mean, did you ever look back and think about, wow, like I've made it, or do you still have a lot of goals and like things that you want to achieve in life?
I think I'll answer the question in two parts. So one, last 2 weeks ago, I was nominated for Marketer of the Year by PR Week, which was very Lang, which was very nice. I lost.
That's awesome.
I lost. Thank you. But it was still very nice. And so that was a moment of reflection for me. I went with a friend and, I said, like, it's crazy. My first job in New York was selling clothes at Bloomingdale's 15 years ago. And had you told me that I would be the CMO of an almost $2 billion company 15 years later, I would have laughed. I moved to New York thinking it was just a phase. And I, of course, stuck around and continued to have really great opportunities. So, I feel very, very lucky. I have an extraordinary team. I've learned so much from all of them and continue to learn from them every day. And then in terms of goals and, what's out there, I think what I've learned along with everyone else for the past few years is like, you can't think that far out. When people say to me, what do you want to do eventually? Some days I think, okay, great. Maybe I do want to be the CMO of a public company. And then there are days when I think, hey, maybe I want to be like a manager or a director layered at a big public company so that I can just be an RC and clock in at 9 and clock out at 5. And so it really depends on the day. It depends on what's happening in the world. But the thing that's most important to me is that I believe in the product that I'm marketing and that I'm learning on the job. And that's, I think that's the reason that I'm compelled to stay at Stack.
Yeah, that's amazing. Who do you attribute all of your success to? Is there like a mentor, a family member, or just someone in life that you're close with that kind of pushed you to think more like a leader? Because in order to be a successful CMO, you kind of have to think like really about a company, and you have to kind of lead a team and everything. Is there anyone that you attribute your success to?
I think there's 3 people. I'll start with the cliche ones. Both my parents and my dad's an immigrant, and my dad, he worked very hard. Grew up in extreme poverty to become a physician. So his work ethic definitely is carried through to me and both my siblings. And my mom is extremely nice and like one of the sweetest people I've ever met. And so I think she's taught me to be a very empathetic leader. And I've learned, despite working in agencies and with clients who maybe are a more cutthroat culture than
high stress. Yep.
Yeah. I think you can always lead with empathy. And even when you're practicing radical candor, it can be delivered, nicely. The message can be delivered nicely. And then in terms of like a business mentor, my previous boss at GLG, this guy, Richard Socarides, who was head of public affairs there, I learned a lot from him. He was a special advisor to Bill Clinton. So he worked for a president.
Wow.
And what he taught me, which is super interesting, is that one, in this, and not to sound like I'm brand nosing in any way, but like to treat the CEO like a president to some extent is really beneficial to your career across 2 dimensions. One, be able to see around corners. Like what, and I think that's something he learned at the White House. Anyone who works in the White House learns is like, what are people going to be talking about in a month, in 6 months, in 12 months? It's not just putting out the fire today, but it's being prepared for what the next fire will be. And that's been really helpful to me. And then 2, always know what you're talking about. And I think that in the same way that, Richard would go to a White House briefing meeting and he would say like, okay, here are the numbers, here's the research. I try to be the same way when it comes to a meeting with the CEO, with the CFO, with our CRO. I know what's going on with regard to, I know how many people attended our field event today. I know what's happening with our performance marketing agency, what the fee structure is. I also know what our brand tracking survey looks like, what our pricing and packaging strategy is from product marketing. And so that requires like a very direct line of communication with all 5 of my direct reports and their functional teams. But it served me incredibly well because, I come across as like smart and with it, and I'm not, and I think that goes a long way. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you kind of train you train your direct reports to think the same way. And now everyone has this mindset of be on top of things. And that's kind of how you succeed in marketing. You can't just wing things. You have to know how past campaigns have run in order to know what to double down on and what to cut, right? Early on. Totally.
And I think it also goes back to communication. Like over communication is so key. If you have a win, tell people what the win was and over communicate. Like I always say when we're talking to sales, or if we're trying to get them to do something or celebrate something, Slack, Zoom meeting, email. They might not read the email. They might not see the Slack. They might not attend the meeting. But if we do all 3, one of them is going to land.
Well, man, I can only imagine how your meetings at one-on-ones or weekly meetings with your teams are. It must be super fun. If you ever need any hot sauce on those team meetings, let me know. I got you covered.
My first and last hot sauce meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Khalid, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was super fun. So many things that we couldn't even cover. We might have to do round 2 sometime later on in the year, maybe for your 6-year anniversary. You're coming up to that. Before we jump out, is there anything, how can we follow more on your personal life or on Stack Overflow? Any channels that you're LinkedIn? Are you active on LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yeah. I'm active on LinkedIn in a business capacity, and I'm not very unprofessional, but I don't talk much about work on Twitter, but I have fun on Twitter. Lots of food stuff, New York stuff, what have you. And then when it comes to following the company, we have a pretty prolific blog we publish every single day. Newsletter, about 2 million people subscribe, that goes out once a week. That is great for developer trends and insights. And then a podcast, which is, pretty consistently ranked in Spotify's top 100 tech podcasts. So if you're a developer in particular, not maybe great for marketers, but if you market to developers, you might find it interesting.
What's the name of the podcast?
The Stack Overflow podcast.
The Stack Overflow podcast. There you go. And are you the host?
I'm not the host. I'm not the host, unfortunately, but that's developer marketing for you. Like, don't try to be cute. Just call it what it is.
Just call it what it is. Yeah, man, exactly. Well, Khalid, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks so much.
So I hope you liked that episode. Rather than sitting here and telling you to hit that subscribe button or smash the like button, I'll say this instead. Send me a screenshot if you actually liked one of our episodes or you subscribe to our channel, and I'll take the next hot sauce shot with your name on it. Even better, you can come on the show, ask questions, and take hot sauce shots together with the next CEO, CMO, or founder that comes on the show. I hope that you've learned a few things or two listening to some of our episodes. We post every Friday. And finally, if you have any feedback or ways that I can improve the show, let me know. Thanks. See you on the next one.